Okay, and here we go. Podcast, not the worst podcast, episode 2. You ready?
Now I am.
Hello, podcast universe. This is the Not the Worst podcast, and this is episode 2. I am JD, and this is my co-host. Co-host.
Co-chief.
Oh, I got something in my throat. Co-host.
Co-chief.
Anthony, and we're going to talk a little bit about. Well, we actually got some military stuff to talk about today, which will be a first. I mean, it's only our second episode, but but it's like a minor. It's like one story out of like 6 that we're going to be talking about. So
Yeah, I don't know how much
Cool.
detail go into it either.
oh, it's fine. It's good. I think it's it mixes it up a little bit, and then we got a couple of gaming things to talk about.
Yeah, and the
Right.
gaming should, especially, I'm excited about both of them, so it should be interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting discussions worth having. I think. So let's. Do you have
Just
anything you
dive
want
in.
to say intro wise?
Nope. Yeah, we're just gonna talk about the thing. We're gonna talk. I mean, we're gonna be talking about The Last of Us for gaming news and the Minecraft library. So I'm excited about both of those. Mainly the Minecraft library, honestly, and I now have a personal goal for myself to find it. So
Yeah. We'll talk more about that. So let's go to the Mosaic warfare that you were talking about before, that you sent me a couple leaks about. And why don't you break that down for us? Tell us what Mosaic warfare is and why anybody should care.
maybe nobody should care. It depends. I actually just found it interesting. It made me think of an old video. It's when I was still at Langley that I watched, where that it's a new approach to how we're going to do warfare in the future. Which obviously that's no shocker. We're going to constantly be looking at how the military and the government will be conducting warfare in the future. This program, though, is being headed up by DARPA, and it's going by 2 names now. Mosaic Warfare is the official name. The second name is the Lego Warfare, or Lego War. And the simple version of the simple breakdown of this concept is, instead of, like, say we have a specific mission we need to do in a war, and instead of just saying, hey, you know what, we're just going to send the army in and do this, or even if we have Air Force in, the involvement would be little. It's supposed to be like layers of little small bits and pieces of component involving the U.S. government and the military having to deal with dealing with potential threats. The best way they gave an example of this is it was interesting, and one of the reasons why it's kind of pushing this new strategy into warfare is China. Honestly, is what's motivating this. China and a little bit of Russia, but China seems to be the big motivation on this new strategy, being that China has literally invested a lot of time and money over the past years to figure out how to counter us specifically and how we conducted warfare. They found out China's been studying our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan and are kind of like head bashing with Iran and our involvement with Syria. And they've been analyzing what we've been doing to handle those conflicts to see how they can counter us. And right now we rely heavily on our assets like air power. We do a lot of massive airstrikes to take out targets and try to get as little troop involvement as possible. And we use platforms like where I'm currently at. We have what's called the J-Star, the E8C, that's built by Northrop Grumman. And it's an ISR platform that it's mainly for reconnaissance, but it does electronic warfare kind of things, does some jamming. But it's mainly used to relay information to the field commanders on potential targets to engage. From what I understand from the E8C, though, is to gather intel on targets before going into an engagement, whereas the AWACS, the E9s, they gather real life data on targets and relay that information as the combatant commanders on the field engage targets, to include ground targets and ground forces and air forces, and sometimes even the Navy if we're close enough to involve the Navy. But China has realized this and has invested a lot of money in, not so much aside from like their ship destroying missiles they got now, and now they got anti-satellite missiles they're working on. They're working on a lot of information warfare, like hacking blocking our data transfers. And that's going to hurt us a lot because we relied too heavily on it. And going up against people like Iraq and Afghanistan, we really didn't have to worry about protecting ourselves from those things because they were very guerrilla warfare style people. They weren't really big into electronic warfare or anti-missile ships and all that. So they did mention Russia, but everything I read and watched kept saying China, China, China. So this is obviously a big counter to whatever China's got going on with them right now, with kind of Russia as a back page, because they know probably if we get involved in China, Russia might try something too. But this whole philosophy of war, I guess is the way you describe it. Instead of lately, we've been seeing like the development of the F-22, the F-35. There's supposed to be a brand new stealth bomber that we're working on, but apparently that's been put on hold for funding issues or whatever, because the military's taking a lot of budget cuts, rightfully so in some areas, and in my personal opinion, unrightfully so. But that's going to dive into the political side of things, and that's not what this podcast is going to be about. So that has hurt, like, mainly the Air Force, which is where I'm mainly tied in. So that's why I took interest in it, because this new strategy is going to rely heavily on Air Force and its assets, and to repurpose them so they don't become obsolete. That way we don't have to spend millions and billions and trillions of dollars on new equipment. Instead of just repurpose what we have, and maybe even if we have to develop new equipment, it's smaller, cheaper, and more expendable. So that way we're not worried about like these. I can't remember what the F-22 cost. It was over $1 trillion, I think, for the development of the F-22. So the government's trying to get away from that. Because now the F-22, we spend all that money, and the simple answer to the F-22 is it cannot get anywhere close to China now to engage targets, because China's spent all this time to counter it. So I watched a video put on by DARPA. It was actually pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't leak it in our document. I found it tonight, and it actually kind of simplified it. They got really technical in the discussion about Mosaic warfare, and I actually fell asleep during it a few times. So, but DARPA had a simple version of it, and they had, pretty graphics and animations and stuff to show what they're talking about. So I was able, it's kind of like a picture book. I was able to follow along a little better. But the best way to describe this concept is they specifically use a Air Force heavy operation. Like, let's say we getting ready to weaken ground targets on like China's building a lot of man-made islands in this China Sea. So they use an example of us getting ready to take out some targets on this island so we can get ground assets onto this island, either via a ship or airdrop or whatever, however we want to get them in there. And they had one lone F-35 completely converted to actually not even completely converted to not only engage ground targets, but also to be able to designate and coordinate. It was like a mobile command center, all in this one F-35. So the F-35 was flying like ahead towards the island, and they were specifically talking about taking out anti-air defenses that China's spent a lot of money on. That basically the way it's built now, our planes, even our stealth ones, are going to struggle getting anywhere near the island to attack, because once they get in that range, a missile goes up, the jet's shot down, and that's it. It's over. So what this F-35 does is it flies towards the island like it's going to do a ground strike. So China's going to like, oh, they're coming. We're getting ready to get in this attack. And then the F-35 goes, hey, I'm picking up a radar signal over here, and relays it back to a modified C-130 that literally becomes a flying mothership. It's like, it literally, for those who plays like RPGs and stuff, it calls out minions from itself. It drops like 3 or 4 tiny drones about the size of like maybe Cessnas out from the C-130. They fly ahead of the F-35. They work together to find, they're not even looking for the missile sites. They're looking for the radar that's jamming and detecting the F-35 coming in. And they paint this target with imagery and sensors, and they fly like in a diamond shape formation, and they all relay information back and forth to each other, and they're supposed to do it in an anti-hacking ability. I mean, everybody keeps using the word anti-hacking, but give it time, everything's hackable. But at the current technology they're working with, it shouldn't be hackable. So these drones fly in a diamond formation. They specifically look for the radar that's detecting the F-35, designate that target. They also, between the three of them, work a jamming system so the radar can't pick them up, and so to make them last as long as possible. But they're supposed to be really cheap drones, so if they get shot down, nobody's going to cry over it. But obviously, they don't want to just let them fly in and let them get shot down and waste all that money. Because, I mean, nobody likes hearing taxpayers' dollars just getting blown out of the sky and saying, hey, it's okay, that's what we built it for. And then they relay that information back to the F-35. The pilot will have a heads-up display in the F-35. And ultimately, they're trying to use as little human interaction as possible. However, the pilot makes the final call of whether or not to engage the target and what target that should be. So the F-35... he'll analyze the data from the drones. He'll look at the imagery that the drones were able to generate. They'll make a 3D image of the target. And he goes, yep, that's exactly what we're looking for. He relays it back to the C-130, which will drop about 10 miniature cruise missiles that apparently one of them alone is not enough to take out a target. But again, they're super cheap. They'll be easy to produce. And the whole concept is these miniature cruise missiles will drop from the C-130 and just launch towards the target, and then the target will panic thinking it's aircraft coming in. They'll launch the anti-aircraft missiles, take out some of the cruise missiles, and all they need is 2 of the 10 missiles to get through to take out their target. So the anti-air system will take out the other cruise missiles thinking it's incoming enemy aircraft, and the 2 that survive will come in, take out the radar site. Then the F-35 will come in behind the radar site and destroy the anti-air missiles. And then they take other small pieces. I mean, they didn't get into the ground aspect, but then the Army or the Marines will take the top out, making smaller Navy ships instead of the massive, huge Navy ships we used to know, because now they're big, giant targets for the Chinese to hit, with little to no defense capabilities against what China's developed. So they're trying to go smaller, less manned, cheaper is like the basic concept. And all these small pieces within the branches are supposed to make this big, giant picture of war. So let's say the Navy comes in, the Marines, instead of using these gigantic, I don't know if you've seen them, JD, the gigantic hovercraft that the Marines have used for landing operations every now and then. I don't think I've seen them in active combat, but when I was in Virginia, I could see them in the Chesapeake Bay every now and then.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen those.
They're big enough to haul like an M1 Abrams on it, and if they wanted to, they can have a helicopter on there and like a couple hundred troops. So they're going from these gigantic hovercrafts to these little rib boats, like you get in a battlefield. And the Marines will just, like, a boat will have 5 Marines with a bunch of equipment, and each boat will carry different squads of Marines, and every Marine was responsible for equipment. And they'll end up building, like, missile launch platforms on the beach once they land. And then they secure the beach, and then the Army will come in, and the Army will have, like, little drones that they can drive along ahead of the platoon, and they'll, like, be so small, like, the enemy, if they're looking for an armored battalion and they find an enemy tank hiding in some bushes somewhere, the drone will see that tank, mark it, relay it back to the Army, who would relay it back to the Marines' missile battery, and the missile battery will without even thinking, the moment the Army says, yes, this is it, missile battery launches, destroys the tank. The Marine Army continues on without even physically engaging. They even talk about portable anti-tank missiles. So these Army guys can be like way out of sight and mark the tank with this drone and launch the missile without even having to see the tank from their own shoulders or relay it back. And so it'll be like a fallback to the fallback. If the Marines can't hit it with their missile battery, or the missile gets destroyed before getting to the tank, then the Army will use their shoulder-mounted missiles and go in and take out the tank. So it's the reason why is because the Chinese have focused so hard to combat our strategies that they want to be able on the fly. Anytime China counter something, they want to be able to go like that, and then a new strategy comes up before the Chinese can react and they can take it out. So it's like a big game, rock, paper, scissors. So we play the paper, and China plays the scissors. Then we play the rock immediately after, before China can react, and we take out those scissors. And so these tiny pieces that's why they call it Mosaic War. They're tiny pieces for a big picture, and everything is cheaper, smaller, and quicker. That's basically the strategy is. So I found that pretty interesting, and it made me remember a video I watched a long time ago, and I think it was done by the History Channel. I really tried to watch it, try to find it and watch it. And I don't know how familiar you are with aircraft and our bombers right now. Have you heard of the B-1 Lancer or the B-1 bomber?
I'm sure I've heard of it, but I don't pay that much attention to it.
or care enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the B-1 bomber is it's called the Lancer. It's a supersonic bomber, and its wings can fold in and out. It's kind of like the F-14 Tomcat and some other aircraft that are capable of doing something like that. And it's mainly used for air-to-ground targeting. And the Navy's now asking the Air Force to get involved to make it an anti-ship missile platform. So they'll carry a bunch of these anti-ship missiles. They'll fly off in the distance. And the Navy say, "Hey, the ship's giving us a hard time. Drop a missile." But as that's not the video I was watching. The video I was watching, they took all the bombs and surface or air-to-ground missiles off this bomber and put a bunch of air-to-air missiles on. So they will have 2 B-1 bombers flying side by side with like hundreds of missiles attached to it, and they're all air-to-air missiles. And they'll have maybe 5 F-22s flying ahead of the B-1 bomber, and with one lead F-22 way out ahead, and that lead F-22 will designate targets. And in the back, so behind the Lancers would be like a 747 with a laser cannon on his nose. I remember this before I joined the Air Force. We've been working with the Israelis working on this cannon called the Nautilus laser cannon system. And it's not like a laser like you're thinking in Star Wars where you see pretty lights going pew pew. It's like a heat ray, basically. And they mounted it on the nose of a 747. So basically this lead F-22 would fly out ahead of all the other aircraft, find like a squadron of 20 plus Chinese fighters that are up in the air, start pinging these targets, and then first the Nautilus laser cannon will start heating the warheads on the missiles on the Chinese jets, make the missiles explode and destroy the Chinese planes, and they won't know what's going on because they were not going to get any missile warnings. They're just going to know, hey, our jets are randomly blowing up. What the heck is going on? And then once they figure it out, because once they start maneuvering, the cannon's not going to be able to hit them because it's not going to be able to like follow tiny planes zipping around everywhere. So then that lead F-22 is like, all right, Chinese are panicking. They figured it out. They're being hit. They'll relay the information back to the B-1 bombers. B-1 bombers will literally just unleash a payload of 200 plus anti-air missiles from them, like a huge missile platform. Just launch all these missiles, pick off a bunch of Chinese planes, and then whatever. And obviously, they're not going to get them all. Whatever remains, the remaining 5 F-22s will come in and clean up whatever's left of the Chinese jets. So that's what made me get all excited about this, because it sounds like they're furthering this whole concept of, instead of having a 5-on-5 match of fighter jet versus fighter jet, they're doing, everybody's got a role, and they're going to fill that role and use that role to strategy and pick them down little by little until the actual fighter squadron gets in, and they have barely anything to clean up by the time they get there. So I thought that was pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like a good analogy for somebody who isn't military or doesn't doesn't really relate. And I think looking at the Mosaic warfare, like our military now is Apple from the 1990s, right? Back then, Apple was trying to compete with Microsoft, and they were trying to build a bigger and better computer every time. They were coming out with new iMacs and new desktops, and they were just trying to make it the best computer they had. And then Steve Jobs comes in, and they're like, forget the computers. Let's make something small. And then they made the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
So then the iPhone became something that they were making smaller and smaller every time, and they were making different iterations of it every single time. And you had like the iPod and the iPhone, and you had all these little things that
the
they
Nano,
were using.
the Touch, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. The Nano, the Touch, they had all these little itty bitty parts. And I think that's what the Mosaic warfare is. It's taking what our military right now is, just trying to build something bigger and better every time. We're trying to build a bigger ship. We're trying to build a more stealthy bomber. We're trying to do all that stuff. But instead of doing that, make it smaller and make individual things that can all add up to the same functionality of that one big piece. So you're not having all of your eggs in one basket kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They actually use that word, not having all the eggs in one basket. Oh. So like if the Chinese hit one target, they're not wiping out everything. We're like, well, okay, I guess we're packing up and going home because they just took out everything we had. So
yeah,
and cool. that is a good analogy, because it is like the military is going away from the big flashy special looking aircraft and equipment, and now like, okay, maybe that's not, just because it looks cool doesn't mean we need to build it. We should probably go small and practical.
Yeah.
And that because they're also concerned the Chinese outnumber us 10-1, so they need to be able to overwhelm them as quickly as possible. So, and the way we're set up and built now, we're not going to be able to do that. So that's their concern anyway.
Cool.
So yeah, that's
great. That's really interesting. We'll have to throw those links down in the description in case anybody wants to read about Mosaic Warfare or the Lego War, which sounds cooler.
It is,
but it's probably trademarked, and they'd have to buy the license from Lego.
Yeah, and I think Lego is all about having fun and peace and love and all that. So that
I feel like Lego would be like, let's not attach our name to warfare. Doesn't sound good.
Yeah. So that was it about DARPA. Yeah, I have in our document the DARPA website link, and then also there's an Air Force magazine link, and there's a YouTube video by Epoch Times. I didn't find it all that great, so I'd probably replace that link with the DARPA video because it simplified the whole process very quickly. So if you're not looking to spend, because the articles are huge, so if you don't spend all day reading an article, the video I think did a pretty good job at simplifying it.
Okay. So. And let's talk about our next topic then. We're good? Yeah.
Yeah, Last of Us, End of Us.
Yep. So let's go on to The Last of Us 2. It's the sequel to The Last of Us 1. That's how you know, because they put the numbers at the end.
So exciting.
But what we really want to talk about, obviously this game is coming out, and it's a highly anticipated game. It's probably going to be extremely detailed because the first one was just an amazing game. So it kind of had set a pretty high bar for them to try and beat. But what we really wanted to focus on was specifically an article from Kotaku from Jason Schreier. I hope that's how you say his name. He's a really good writer. And he writes really good articles about the crunch in game development. And the crunch is this period right before a game comes out where they're just trying to slam as much time as they can to get all of the details right. And it pushes game developers to the brink. A lot of them have mental health issues because of it, or they quit the job and they move on to something else because they just can't handle it anymore and that kind of thing. And it's something that plagues the game development industry. And in his article about The Last of Us 2, apparently Naughty Dog is like up there in the world of people who crunch. And they said it's because Naughty Dog has such a insane drive for detail. Like they're perfectionists in their game, which you can see if you've played like The Last of Us, or they did the Uncharted series, which were really good games. And they even talk about in the article how Naughty Dog doesn't hire junior level people. They don't hire inexperienced people because they know the people who come in know they're going to be working crazy hours and doing crazy kind of detail on the games to get them done. And I know one of the things you wanted to talk about was the game that you were looking forward to, right? And how crunch kind of hurt that game. Why don't you talk about that a little bit too, and then we'll discuss crunch.
Yeah. So I read the Naughty Dog article by Jason Schreier, who actually is ironically also the writer of the Anthem article.
Hold on a second. You're breaking up. Say that again. Say that part again.
I was just saying, the article I'm going to refer to with the Anthem is also written by Jason Schreier.
It is. I didn't even know.
So you like JD was saying, he's big into the crunch culture that video game development's getting into these days. And when JD talked about, hey, let's talk about Last of Us, and I was like, yeah, we could do that. I know a lot of people like Last of Us, and I actually know absolutely nothing. I know what Last of Us is. I know the hype behind it. I've never played it or seen it because I don't own a PlayStation 4. And I know it's a beautiful looking game from what I've seen of it. And like he said, Naughty Dog are the perfectionists. They encourage their developers to take creative licensing when they're doing their animations and graphics. Like, hey, if you think of a way to make this look prettier, or like one guy prided himself in Uncharted 4. He added a mechanic where if you shoot a bag, barley will pour out, and the bag will slowly shrink as the barley poured out. And then they talk about, I don't know if it's the first Last of Us or in this current Last of Us they're still working on, that you shine the flashlight on the girl that I can't remember her name, but
the first one, yeah.
and she would flinch and close her eyes
from the light, right?
Yeah, which may not sound like a big deal to anybody that doesn't video game on the regular, but that's impressive that they have mechanics like you. I don't know how many times you can shine a light in anybody in any game and they're just staring at you with a blank stare the whole time.
Right.
So they love that kind of thing. And which the reason why I was like, yeah, I totally want to get on board with this, because one of my biggest complaints about current, especially big title games these days, is these developers see the money in these games and they end up getting so excited that I remember the day where you would wait years in between game installments. Like Call of Duty would come out, and then 4 years later, Call of Duty 2 finally came out. Or I can't remember the actual gap, but it wasn't Call of Duty this year, then Call of Duty next year, and the same thing, like Battlefield's starting to fall in that same rut. Halo tried it a little bit, but they still have gaps in it. But you see these franchises that are like, hey, this title's really making me money. How fast can I crank this out before the holiday season to really rein in that big bucks? And I know there's some diehard fans out there who probably think I'm blasphemous for saying this, but I think Treyarch, Infinity Ward, whoever's in charge of Call of Duty now, because it's changed names now, I think they're making a mistake, and I think it's retarded, and I'm getting sick of it. And it's probably why I think their games are garbage, because I don't see the pride in these games anymore. It's about what can we do to make it prettier, faster, cooler, and get that money in. I was talking with JD with Deep Rock Galactic. One of the things I love about that game, it's a private small developer, and you can tell they take pride in the game. They do stupid little things like you can get drunk off beer you can buy at the bar after you get back from mid-mission, to the point where you pass out. You got dancing features. You can shut off graffiti in the space station. There's no purpose to any of this except you can. It doesn't benefit the game in any way. The dwarves say stupid little comments throughout missions and make fun of each other, and it's entertaining. So, and the same thing with this is what I'm getting from Satisfactory. It seems like a game that somebody takes pride in, and they're just doing it because they can. They're not doing it for the money. I mean, nobody's going to say no to money. You get a money, nobody's going to say no to it. But I think like EA, it sounds like Naughty Dog I don't know if they're doing it in the money. It sounds like they're in the
kind of going down a different path. They're such perfectionists that they're demanding too much.
Yeah,
almost.
And it is hurting their developers and the people working with them. But what I read in the article, there's actually a group that love the crunch that work for Naughty Dog, right. And they said,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that. I mean, that was the weird part about some of what he was talking about, is that these, a lot of times the crunch is bad because you're dealing with like junior game developers or people who are just trying to get into the industry, and they don't realize what the crunch is, or that they're going to have to be working weekends and miss time with their family and stuff like that. But according to the article, Naughty Dog hires people with the full knowledge that they're going to be putting in that crunch. Like they know getting hired that's what they're going to do. So yeah, I think, and so that ends up with people who actually kind of look forward to it. But that kind of almost feels like, like a, what was I going to say? Like a, Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. Like they're being put into this bad situation and being told that it's a good situation, and they're like, oh yeah, I can see how it's a good thing.
Yeah,
like I don't know.
They even had people saying like they actually almost feel like they're, even if they don't have anything to do, some of them are starting to feel obligated to stay late just because everybody else is staying late to work on their projects. Now, one of the things JD mentions, like he said, they'll get new hires because after Uncharted 4, they lost 70% of their team, which hurt them big time. So they had to hire a bunch of people, and it kind of caused some more stress on the veteran developers, because they're like, well, now we got to teach these guys the ropes. We got to train them on how we work and teach them everything we need to teach while trying to develop this game in the amount of time the developer wants us to do it. Naughty Dog wants to do it, and they're feeling the burn from that, which in turn will make more veterans to quit, which made more new people to get hired, and which made the veterans get more irritated because now they have to stop what they're doing and hope to finish the project before time ran out. But again, and like you said, it's like a Stockholm syndrome, because I'm like, yeah, we thrive in the crunch, while others are saying, no, this is absolutely killing us. So people are getting anxiety, they're getting depression.
Yeah, I think the fact that they have such a huge turnover kind of speaks to, even if people are enjoying the crunch or they know it's coming, that's not good, right? Like, and game development has a lot of turnover in general. Usually when people finish a game, they move on but 70% is a huge number for turnover. I think even for game development, it seems really large.
And it should be a problem. I mean, there's nothing wrong with crunch. There's times like in my military experience when like, hey, stuff really hit the fan, or like, no kidding, everybody's gonna stop what you're doing. We gotta get these like jets rolling out the door as quickly as possible. So everybody, all hands on deck. I enjoy that, but every now and then, if I'm doing it every single day for the rest of my life, I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. It happened while I was in Turkey. I was like, all right, so I'm doing something that to me that I thought that mattered. This mission is important. Yeah, I'm all gun ho. Would tell me what to do, where to go, and get it done, and I'll do it as long as it takes. But eventually, for 15 months, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. Yeah. I'm burnt out. I'm disgruntled. I'm depressed. I hate everything. That's the most disgruntled I've ever been in my entire life. And so, thriving on crunch is good every now and then. I think
because you missed my wedding, though, right?
It was all because I missed Mindkiller's wedding. Yes, I was completely devastated. And that happened in the beginning of my tour in Turkey.
Yes, he missed my wedding. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, you're about to miss mine too, so I don't want to hear it.
Well, don't blame that on me. That's Corona's fault.
Well, it wasn't my fault. I missed yours either, so
I don't know.
You can blame ISIS for that one.
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, there was a whole mess, and he has not let me forget that yet. So
yeah, that's true.
And every time,
yeah. And you didn't talk about the other game, Anthem?
Anthem, yeah. So I was really looking forward to Anthem. I'm not a comic book nerd. I've never read any of the comic books, but I grew up on the cartoons that were inspired by the comic books, and my favorite one was between Spider-Man and Iron Man. Well, there's hundreds of Spider-Man games out there. In fact, Sony just had one of their most successful Spider-Man games recently. Yeah. So I've never had my shortage of feel of like, hey, I want to be the web swinging hero for the day. I can do it because they're out there. They're everywhere. I've never really seen an Iron Man game. I think there was one made after the first Iron Man movie, but any game based off.
They made them for the movies, but movie-based games are never good.
They're garbage. Yeah. Just like usually movie-based or game-based movies are usually garbage too.
Yeah.
It kind of goes hands in hand. But then I heard this story this game Anthem, which wasn't really supposed to be an Iron Man game, but it was always described of it's Iron Man. You're Iron Man. You get your Iron Man suits. You get your different Mark suits. You get the big, heavy, bulky ones. You get to fly around this massive map that's supposed to be a dynamic environment. And so I got super hyped about it, but I should have realized it was EA. But I tried to put faith in BioWare because I know BioWare did Mass Effect. BioWare did BioShock, and so it's like, hey, everybody loves those games. I love the Mass Effect. Never played Andromeda. From what I understand, I didn't miss anything other than disappointment. So, but what I understand, Andromeda fell under the same thing, the crunch, and that killed them. In fact, they said up until Andromeda, BioWare was one of the biggest studios in EA with the most morale and the happiest workers. But when Andromeda came out, that completely flipped. And by the time Anthem rolled around and people started working on Anthem, they said it got to the point where different BioWare teams were at each other's throat. The one in Texas hated the one in Canada. The one in Canada hated the one in France because they just couldn't get along anymore. And honestly, I believe it's EA's fault because they came in there. EA came in like was part of Jason Schreier's article, the beginning part. He was talking about how Anthem wasn't even supposed to be called Anthem. It was supposed to be called Beyond. And they said just days before the E3 convention in June 2017, EA came down and said, hey, you know what? It's going to be too hard to trademark Beyond. We're switching to Anthem. They already had T-shirts made for the staff to do the promotions at E3. And they're like, no, it's Beyond. It's Anthem now.
That would be so annoying.
But that was the tip of that's just like not even the tip of the iceberg for what EA did. They did that all the time. They went from, we don't want them to fly. Yes, they must fly. Yes, this must be in space. We don't want it in space. Hey, let's make it by like Dragon Age, but put it in space. I'm like, no, we don't want to make it like Dragon Age. Dragon Age is its own thing. If we're going to do BioWare, if we're going to do Anthem, we want something different. We don't want to follow what we've done with Anthem or Mass Effect or BioShock. We want something different. But EA is like, but it worked in Dragon Age. It did, but they had They had the crunch in Dragon Age too. They said some of the Dragon Age team members came over to Anthem. And they said they actually secretly hoped Dragon Age, the last one, was going to fail because they knew if it failed, EA would no longer expect that from them. But since apparently it did as well as it did, they're like, well, crap, EA is going to constantly expect this from us. And they did. And that's what they did with Anthem. They kept changing the name, the title, how it looked. And then first it wasn't supposed to have microtransactions. They're like, EA is like, totally throw microtransaction in here because that's the new hot thing. So everybody wants microtransactions. No, we really don't. We really don't want microtransactions.
Nobody does. Nobody does, EA. Nobody has ever wanted them. Stop it.
Especially if you're paying $60 for a full game. It's a little different if you're playing a free-to-play like League of Legends or Smite or Fortnite where you're not paying for the game. So if you want to drop a few bucks into cosmetics, knock yourself out. But if you're paying $60 for a game and it's actually stopping your progression, then yeah, that bothers people. Because now that I paid $60, you want, it's like, and they're like, well, there's no more expansion packs like with Battlefield 5. No more expansion packs, but look at all these microtransactions you can have. So if you don't feel like doing the grind to unlock all the weapons in this class, you can go ahead and buy them. So putting other people at a disadvantage is. But anyway, that's a different argument. The microtransactions can be.
Yeah. Microtransactions, they're their own topic.
Yeah. But so that they were getting sick of this because BioWare felt like they lost their identity for what they used to be back in the age of BioShock and Mass Effect.
It's not BioShock. I was saying BioShock earlier, and that's wrong. It wasn't BioShock, right? I don't think BioWare did BioShock. They did Dragon Age, and they did Mass Effect.
Okay, that maybe, you know what? I think you're right. Are you sure?
I kept saying BioShock, but I don't think that's true. I think just because they're called BioWare, I said BioShock. I think I was getting that confused in my head.
Even before you said that, I always thought they did BioShock. Let me see. But anyway, while I looked that up, the reason why I want to bring Anthem is like Anthem is completely everything wrong with crunch culture for game development.
Right.
Whereas Naughty Dog has some positive lights to their crunch culture. But they talked about one story where these people were working late at 9 o'clock and they were doing renovations in the building on the next floor. And a big steel pipe came crashing to the floor and was within inches of people working at their desks. The construction company thought everybody was gone because they're not supposed to work late, but they were because they were in this crunch culture. And so, I mean, the company reacted quickly, fired the construction company. But the people like this is an example of the unhealthy environment we're living in. We're put in situations in this because we're so dedicated to getting this game out, and like JD said, they're hiring perfectionists. And the problem with hiring perfectionists, nobody wants to finish anything or leave until they get it fixed the way they want it.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely creates some bad conflict there. Yeah. Yeah. It's not. It was the BioWare was Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age, and Mass Effect. Those are their big franchises. I don't know. I don't know why we got stuck on BioShock.
Yeah, so sorry about that, guys, for messing that up.
That's my bad.
BioShock was 2K.
Yeah. There was irrational games.
Yeah.
So anyway, doesn't matter. We're just talking about crunch, and I'm sure, like I would bet money that BioShock, especially that last one,
they went through
BioShock Infinity or whatever it was. I bet those had crazy crunch just to get those right too. And it's such a I read about these articles all the time, and it's so pervasive in the gaming industry that it's accepted. Like they just think, okay, this is going to happen if I go to work on this game, that we're going to get crunched, and that sucks. I mean, people make games because they love video games, and that's just a good way to beat that love out of them.
Yeah, especially if they get caught up in the crunch and they're spending all this blood, sweat, and tears into these games, and then it releases to the gamers, and then everyone's like, "This is garbage. Why am I paying to play this? What do you guys do to a game I loved? It's destroyed now."
Yeah,
and it's because
it's because by the time they're done making it, those people are so beat down that they don't even realize they're making something bad, and that kind of sucks. I mean, that as far as I know, Anthem is pretty much dead, right? Like,
yeah.
Nobody really liked it when it came out. It didn't stick around very long. And that was supposed to be their next big thing. And it was supposed to be designed to be like Destiny, where it could be upgraded for years and years and years. And now
It's dead.
Last I heard, it's that they still had the Christmas trees up from the holidays. Like they didn't even take their holiday decorations down. So
And it sucks so bad because the original plan for Anthem sounded so cool. This planet was supposed to be like the Bermuda Triangle of space, where all these different races and aliens got sucked in, and they're just struggling to survive. They're interacting with a hostile environment. Not only they said it wasn't supposed to be a whole lot of combat. And it wasn't supposed to be like a weapons grind like Destiny. It was supposed to have Destiny-like features, but it wasn't supposed to be a weapons grind. It was like, I must do this to get the next best weapon out here. It was just, I must do this just to complete an objective. They talk about one mission even going in, like the whole purpose of the mission was you were supposed to fly in with your suits into an active volcano, find out why this volcano that was never supposed to erupt suddenly went violent and started getting active, find out why it's about to erupt, and try to stop it from erupting. And while dealing with all these hostile aliens that are angry and disgruntled because they just got sucked into this planet and they're not supposed to be on, and nobody can find a way out. And you're supposed to go out salvage tech to improve your suits, your guns, but that's gone. It's this garbage that they have out now. Then they even admitted putting intentional blockers in to slow down the gameplay. Like this one mission everybody complained about, it was a chain mission, but it was so time oriented that it took multiple days for people to beat this one mission because they intentionally slowed it down. And from what I understand, BioWare is like, this is a mistake, don't do that. But EA is like, no, we want the longevity of the game. They're like, you don't understand. People are going to get frustrated and bored with this because there was supposed to be an in-depth story to this game, but that kind of got thrown out the window like the first Destiny. And the mission that could have been something cool ended up not being anything cool because, yes, the individual mission had a story, but it meant nothing to the actual game. So people are like, I'm wasting all this time and I can't continue until it's done, but it means nothing to the actual story of the game.
All right.
So
we're going a little long again. So we're gonna move on. I mean, crunch sucks. Let's move on.
It destroys the things we love.
And we'll talk about Minecraft pretty quick. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about with this Minecraft thing.
No.
It's just really cool. It's a neat concept.
It's an example of what video game is doing to the actual real world these days, and how the influence it's having.
So this organization called Reporters Without Borders, they have journalists all over the world, and a lot of them work in environments that are hostile to journalists, like Egypt or Russia, where there's
China.
Censorship of the press. Yeah, and so what they did was they commissioned a library to be built in Minecraft, and inside this library, they basically use this as a way to get around the censorship of the internet, of the press in those countries, because Minecraft is available
everywhere
and it isn't censored the way that the rest of the internet is. So they can go inside Minecraft and put their articles and their press inside this library that's built inside the server of a Minecraft game. And then people can go in there and read these articles that would otherwise be oppressed. Would not be allowed to leave the country, would not even get published anywhere. And I just think that's really cool. And it's not just like it's like an empty Minecraft server and they just wrote some stuff on a tablet or something. They actually built like a giant
really cool
Library of Congress kind of monument thing in there that
with
you can actually just walk through, which is just really, really cool. And so we're gonna get Anthony here to try and go inside it.
Yeah, and we'll get some footage.
That's what he wants to do.
I do. We'll get some footage of it, and we probably won't show them the podcast because podcasts are all audio. They're not really supposed to be visual. We do this video thing just because it makes it easier for us to record it, and JD can rip the audio. But probably on my YouTube channel, I'll post footage of the library. But the library, if you haven't seen it, looks really cool. Like, someone put a lot of thought and detail in this. And like JD says, there's a lot of countries that everybody complains about our media and our press over in this country. But the beauty of why our media and the press is, regardless of what you feel about it, is because we have the freedom. They can do whatever they want without repercussions other than being criticized by critics. That's the worst fear, is being criticized or called bad names. Whereas in these countries, if you say something that the government of that country doesn't like, you're shut down. Some of them are even thrown in jail. They have an example.
Could even be worse. Could even be killed. Could have their families kidnapped. Things like that.
What they do, whatever they can do to coerce the media to talk about what they want to talk about, without getting into detail because it's a sensitive topic on some platforms. What's going on in China right now? They just kicked out all American journalists because they don't want the journalists digging in around what's happening anymore. And this is a perfect opportunity for anybody that's loyal to the American journalists that are out there. They can go into the server now, and post these articles, and they'll have their ways. They probably have secret codes or something, or they might even have a Dewey Decimal System in there to make it easier for if a journalist wants a specific story from a specific country, they can go hunt it down. But it looks really cool. It's got bookcases with books in it. I mean, anybody that's playing Minecraft know what a library is supposed to look like as far as the bookshelves go. But it's just a really cool concept, and it's got me. I used to love Minecraft all the time, but not the. If it wasn't for the story, like JD sent me the article, and I kind of just breezed over. I didn't even read the article. I just saw the picture. I was like, yeah, that's really cool. Somebody spent a lot of time making this really cool looking library. And then I actually took time to read the article. I was like, okay, now this is like really cool. This is like an opportunity for oppressed countries to get their story out there for the rest of the world to know, which is normally not even possible because of the censorship they got over there.
Yeah.
And it's
we'll have to see how well this works out, because it literally just released March 12th.
Like it hasn't.
When like I thought this had been around for a while and we only just discovered it, but this is a brand new thing. So we'll see how well it works, how well the articles get out, and if those countries actually are paying attention, they might even try and find a way to censor this. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, which is unfortunate, but for now it's out there. We do hear a lot of negative press about video games. Like anytime there's a violent act conducted, they blame video games, and this is like an actual positive impact that a video game's having on a society, which is really cool. So it's kind of refreshing. Yeah, and cool. Unless you're against freedom of speech and press, then I don't see why you would hate such a story. I think it's a really cool opportunity.
You're a weirdo if you are.
You are. So, but cool. Yeah, look for that on my YouTube channel if I find it. From what I understand, JD, correct me if I'm wrong, you said it's only available in the Java version of Minecraft.
Yeah, they made it very specifically low tech, so it's like the Java version of Minecraft, and it's like an older version of the Java version, since some of these countries aren't going to have the most up-to-date version. So you have to like roll back your Minecraft to get access to it. Yeah.
And I mean, that's just really cool. This whole purpose, it wasn't just somebody bored in Minecraft and it accidentally became this thing. They did this all on purpose. They thought it through and through. They know these other countries that may not have the fastest internet or the best computers, but if they had this older version of Minecraft, they can just walk right in there and get it knocked out. So, yeah,
very cool. All right, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. This is episode 2. Talked about DARPA and Last of Us game development crunch, and Minecraft. And that's pretty much it. You have anything you want to say to people?
No, just I appreciate you guys joining us. JD is still working out getting all on podcast platforms. I think he's got it on all of them except Apple.
We got it pretty much everywhere, but Apple's kind of delaying it.
Yeah.
They've taken a long time to approve it.
Yeah, so look forward to that. We're going to be tweeting about it. We originally were going to tweet them all together, but Apple's taking its time. It is on Spotify, so I guess that'd be the quick, easy way to do it for
Spotify and
now.
Google Podcasts are the two big ones. It's also on Anchor, Radio Public, Breaker, a couple smaller places if you happen to listen to podcasts in those places. But obviously, it's available in a lot of spots, and you can subscribe anywhere you are comfortable doing so.
Yep.
And use our hashtag NTWP.
Yeah, that's what I was today.
To talk to us if you want to leave a comment or draw a picture of Anthony's ugly face and send it to him.
Why do you think I'm hiding behind the mic?
We'll check it. Yeah, right. I know you are hiding behind the mic today. We're gonna come out and smile and show everybody your pearly whites.
I'm doing myself with my part in social distancing. I figured
maintaining a steady distance of about 2,000 miles.
Yes, from you and whoever is watching, whether you're in the same state or across the world. But yeah, use our hashtag. If we miss something in the topics we talk about that you think would be cool for us to dig up on, or you want to like rehash something we brought up in the past, like Valorant is actually going into detail about their characters now. So we'll probably wait till a lot more news comes out on Valorant before we do a follow-up story. But if you find something really cool you think should be talked about in the next episode, hashtag NTWP. Talk to us about Valorant, or if you just like, hey, I found something really off the wall that a lot of people don't know about, but I think it's really cool. We'll take a look at it, see if it's worth a shot. We'll throw it in the next podcast. So,
And
like,
just a reminder is we're both military. I'm a veteran now because I have a beard, so obviously. But he's active duty, and obviously we talked about DARPA and the Mosaic warfare philosophy. So we're into talking about that kind of stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, hashtag NTWP and ask us questions about the military or share articles with us. We'll talk about that stuff too.
Every now and then the military and gaming world cross over, because there was a story a long time ago when I think PS3 came out. They were using a bunch of PS3s.
Oh, you just broke up.
I was just saying a while ago.
Dang it! Hold on, I gotta.
He's dying. I want to wait till he's done dying. So yeah, I mean, we're like you said, we're both military. We talk about these things too. Sometimes the gaming world will cross over to the military. I remember a long time ago. I can't remember if it was the PS2 or 3. The DoD took like hundreds of these PlayStations and hooked them together, and made like a server out of them. For I don't know what they were working on, but they were. I can't.
Yeah, I remember that too. I don't know what that was for. It was for Bitcoin.
It might be.
DoD was trying to get Bitcoin. I don't know. Yeah, I do remember that. I remember that thing about the PlayStations hooking up, and then I remember they were using Xbox controllers for flying drones and aerial vehicles and stuff. So sometimes we see that kind of stuff every now and then.
So even if you wanted a little bit of both, like, hey, this involves gaming and military news, so talk about this, and we'll look into it. Some cool stuff is happening. And I got ahead and apologize for streaming / video production on my end. Things have been.
What are you talking about?
Things have been crazy.
We're done.
So,
all right. Thank you all. Use that hashtag NTWP and ignore Anthony because he's dumb. Okay, bye. See you next week.
Stay safe, stay healthy.
Wash your hands. All right.